Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me here as we all come together and step forward. Let us step forward. Why are we willing to step forward? Because change will not happen if we do not get on the move. We know what it looks like. We know how gun violence has been rapturing our community, not only within the community, but generations that are being birthed into this. And it's a time that we come together and have healing conversations. So, on today, the guests that I have here are guests that I know, and I know the work that they have been doing. I know what they bring into my life. So, I think it would be amazing for us all to come together and us just have a lovely conversation, lean into one another about just the relationships. Could you do me a favor if you are not muted at this time? Can you mute yourself until it is your turn to speak, please? And thank you. For those of you who are in the audience, we would love for you to comment. We would love for your input to happen. But remember, this is a lean in space. This is not a call out space. This is not a belittle space or put down space. This is a time and a session of healing where we just have those conversations where we lean on one another. Ain't that what the sisterhood does? We lean on one another. And so I would like to introduce my guests panelists on today. We had two guest panelists that had to step back. Remember, the first thing we do is take care of ourselves. And so I want you to just bow and give grace to Ari Davis and give grace to Miss Cynthia Morrison. She will be here next week. We will have a conversation online. And so let's get into this conversation. Leah, can you step forward and introduce yourself, who you are, and what you bring to the table?
Hi, yes, my name is Leah McIntosh, and I'm an entrepreneur and a trainer of NLP and coach, and I help individuals find their way forward after trauma. And so I spend a lot of time teaching clients how to process and um, live a more authentic life after trauma. And it could be from gun violence, it could be from sexual assault. Um, and so that's what I do day in and day out.
Thank you so much, Leah. Can I get you, Miss Latanya, to just lean into the space and introduce yourself? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Latanya Boyd. I am a volunteer with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. I've been a resident of Topeka for at least 30 years. I've raised my 4 children here, as well as a few grandchildren. Um, Gun violence is very personal to me because my 21-year-old daughter was murdered October 13th of 2009, trying to leave a domestic violence relationship. So seeing a lot of our youth and young adults being killed has been very traumatic to me. So I would not want that, anyone to go through that. So I try to reach out to people in our community to give support.
Thank you so much, Tanya. And you are a lot more than just a volunteer with Moms Demand Action. You are a game changer. You are a space of safety for those who come in contact with you. Your essence has never changed. As I was at protests with you going through 2020, vigils with you, you remained the same. You were there because you wanted to bring everyone else into a space of healing. And so we thank you for joining us. Miss Danielle, talk to me, girl.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. I'm Danielle Twinlow. I am a educator here in the community, anywhere from prenatal through early childhood. I am a volunteer with Moms Demand Action. I also am a volunteer in organizations from feeding kids at community centers to working on equity and health justice within our community as well, and a community advocate. Most importantly, I'm a mom of 6 kids and a grandma. And so that always drives me to want to make this world better so they don't have to work so hard.
Thank you. Thank you. So I thank each of you of joining me. This is the way that I've chosen in 2022 this weekend to celebrate my brother who was shot and killed in 2020, to celebrate just the essence of his presence, right? To acknowledge, right, the harms that were done when we think about the mental health system, when we think about the criminal justice system, when we think about institutional and structural racism, when we think about that isolating and shunning process after death. I watched how my family just was divided, right? You know, still to today, Danielle was with me as we walked through the city council journey, and all that was happening at that part, all that I was seeing, all that I was feeling, and I was unable to put words to what I was feeling. Leah watched, and Leah was always like, you need to take care of yourself. Take care of yourself, right? And I just kept having this push, like I have to keep going through this. And there was times where I felt like I was walking through by myself, right? But as my brother Zenny Vassar would say, Regina, boo, sister mom, it's all right to need somebody else. It's all right to need somebody else when we're going through this pain, you all. It's all right to need somebody else to be the voice for you in spaces that you're unable to speak for yourself. It's all right to need or be able to lean on somebody else when you feel like you're just tapped out and you don't know how to do it no more. And so in his legacy, I just come forth and I say to you all, I know that it was a circle that was a cycle of death. Not only did I lose my brother Zenny, but I lost Mark Edwards at the same time, right? In 2020, as people were dying from COVID, in 2020, as gun violence went up in our city, in 2020, as kids began to be isolated, and we know now, right now, today, that they're dealing with a higher level, right? When we're talking about of anxiety, when we're talking about of just different diagnoses that they have been given that all tie into this isolation and traumatic experiences that they've had to deal with. And we know what the data says about the Black-bodied woman. And we know how she has been limited. We know how she is crashing. Her body is crashing. She is being dismantled from within because sometimes we don't feel like we can lean into one another. And because of the trauma, because of the pain, we isolate ourselves and separate. And so today, we're going to lean in, right? Today, we're going to love on each other. Today, we're going to acknowledge that pain. And so I thank you all for resting in this space with me on this weekend. Because even though I've walked it these past couple years, and even though I went through it, I would say to you, most did not know how painful it was. How painful it was to not be able to walk in and see my mother and father. My father is incarcerated right now. And I talk about that again, gun violence, again, mental health, again, substance abuse, right? We're talking about intersectionality where it wasn't just one thing, it was several things that were interconnected to one another. And that did not just harm my father, that harmed the rest of our family, right? And so the family has been broken because of the undealt with trauma. Now let's lean into that. Leah, can we talk a little bit about, I want to get you started, about the side effects of trauma, right? When we talk about trauma on the body, trauma on relationships. Lean in and give us a little bit on that.
Well, from a personal standpoint, my first experience with gun violence was when I was 16. And of course, I wasn't equipped with dealing with all the emotions and the trauma that brought into my life, and neither were my parents. Mainly my mom. She knew more about that than than my dad at the time. And it took me many years, actually up until I was in my 30s, to realize that even after 20 something odd years, I still carry that trauma in my body. One thing that we don't learn, especially in the community, especially in the Black community, we don't talk about trauma. We usually don't talk about feelings. We may express sadness, but it's not something that is brought to the forefront. And I just remember being the 16-year-old girl devastated that my friend was murdered and being depressed by that. And my mother did address me, but she didn't really know how to handle that trauma. And of course, because in the Black community, we don't necessarily seek out counseling and trauma and things like that after we deal with trauma, we hold on to those things. And so when I got old enough and started to really do the work on myself, I realized that not only was I holding on to that trauma and just being devastated that I would never see a friend again, I also had this immense guilt that maybe if I had been a better communicator at that point in my time, or encouraged my friend not to engage with the people he was engaged with, that maybe he would still be here. And I had to forgive myself for that, because you don't know as a child, I was a child, how certain relationships are going to affect you. And he didn't know that, that relationships or those relationships that he had cultivated would lead to his murder. So I had to forgive myself for holding on to something I had no control over and allowing that to just live in me. And then subsequently, because of his death, another friend passed 3 weeks after that. So it was just like you said, an intersectionalism of all these things. My friend got murdered by gun violence. Then my other friend committed suicide right after that because he felt guilty about our friend dying. So these are all things that I had to learn to heal from. And it is still hard, especially during the holidays when I think about how they could be with their kids and one of them had a child or, grew up and got married and they didn't have that experience. It's upsetting. But on the same token, I see such a mass difference of how things were handled back then as opposed to now. I see a lot more people talking about it and willing to talk to the teens about the experiences that maybe that they went through. One thing I didn't mention is I am a native of Topeka, Kansas as well. And my brother is a police officer, and I know what type of work he does in the community and working with the youth there. So, I hear the stories and I know that work is being done. But the one thing that I stress is that, like with Regina saying earlier, I told her she had to take care of herself. You are the first line of defense. And if you're not taking care of yourself and prioritizing your own mental health, you're not going to be of help and of service to anyone else. Because losing someone is hard enough, but when you lose them in such a violent manner, it does something, it changes something in you. And it takes a strong person to realize, okay, I have to take care of me, but also take care of others around me. But you are the first line of defense. And so it doesn't have to be that you have to check out, but you have to find something that will support you in being able to be that strong uplifter for others and understand that not everyone's going to be equipped to be able to do the same for you. So the big thing for me is making sure that your circle is tight. Make sure you do have somebody that will kind of champion for you and make sure that you're taking care of you. And with Regina, sometimes I would get pushback when I would tell her, "You have to take care of you." And it was like, well, I know I need to do that, but are you doing it? Are you taking the time out to do something that you enjoy? Or are you going to seek counsel? Are you talking about how you truly feel? Because a lot of the times we don't, especially if you're a mother and you have a whole lot of stuff going on, you don't have that luxury. But I'm here to say you have to make that a priority in order to move forward.
Yes. Thank you so much, Leah. As Leah was speaking, I was thinking at a time, um, I was in kindergarten and we were staying in Riverview, either Riverview or Shelto in Kansas City, Missouri. And there was a drive-by, right? And the drive-by was actually to kill men. It was men in the car, and I was on that corner. I was going up to that corner that day. Um, and one of my uncles had some Fritos, right? You know how your uncle go get the good snacks, and you like, "Ooh, I got some snacks. I'm about to go get some snacks." But while I was running from the house, it was like a light jog. Y'all know how kids are, because I was excited. The black car was coming up, and the guns were hanging out, and they were shooting, and I was running forward, right? And I just remember like what is going on? Like, what is this? Right? But I got in trouble after that. Remember, we think about this trauma because people were afraid, they were scared. I got back to the house, and the women in the house, instead of like checking to make sure everything was okay, I got reprimanded. I believe I actually even got a whooping. And then I got told, you're always asking people for stuff, right? You're always asking. So, and the reason I'm telling you all this story is because this child just seen this traumatic event, this traumatic thing take place, something they've never had. Like when we talk about imaginations, where I'm talking about kindergarten time, we're talking about imaginations. Imagine what's happening to the mindset of that child at that point, and the shifting that's happening at that point in that child. And I get a whooping, and I get told stop asking people for stuff. That was like the first time I remember ever being told, don't ask nobody for nothing. I'm sick and tired of you asking people for stuff. You always, and so in adulthood it becomes she's prideful. She only depends on herself. She's untrusting. She don't want to trust nobody. But as a child, it was ingrained at a time of trauma. Stop asking people for stuff, even when you're standing there going, I didn't ask for that. My uncles always gave to me, right? Whether it was snacks, money, love, hugs, whatever it was, they always gave to me. But on this day, and it may have been the moment that I stopped asking, I stopped feeling like I was enough to receive anything. I stopped seeing myself as someone to be protected, right? And as I talk to you as we go through this and we lean in on this, how often is this happening to our children when we say, stop crying? What are you crying for? It's been enough time now. They've been gone for this long, right? Get up out your room. Why are you sitting in this room? Right? You're fussing at me instead of leaning into me, right? Can you see me right now? I need you to see me right now. So, um, Danielle, can you just speak to the essence of that, like your experience with gun violence?
So, listening, thank you for sharing feeling safe to share these stories with us, and it's really always, um, for me, really difficult sometimes to stand back and think. I remember the first time that starting this journey was like volunteering with an organization to combat gun violence. What prompted that journey, besides just feeling the need to act, was getting a text message from my daughter, who is a senior, just graduated her senior year of high school. And she texted me at 1:00 in the morning and said, "Mom, so-and-so has been killed. I know more people my age who have died than old people, and I'm scared." And I knew at that point that I had to do more than what I was doing. Like I couldn't just let that comment go, and just console her and say, this is how it is, because I wasn't going to settle for that. And she knew that as well. And I remember when starting that journey, we were asked while volunteering with the organization, are you a victim of gun violence? And I checkmarked no, because no one in my family, no one I've personally, like a very close friend of mine had been killed or had experienced significant gun violence. It was secondary, right? My child was feeling this pain. I was feeling that pain from her. But what I learned, what working within the community and within that field, that is being a survivor of gun violence, that impact is impacting me, because I have those sleepless nights and I have that drive, and I'm also feeling that pain as it trickles down from our youth and from our community, from people I serve within my workplace, and the trauma that they're experiencing. That secondary trauma does make me impacted by gun violence. And this isn't just a one-person issue. This is a community issue. This is all of us. And we know that health factors, social determinants of health, are directly related to the violence that we see within our community. So when we are sitting in communities who don't invest in giving opportunities to people, when we continue to have disenfranchised communities, when we continue to limit resources to neighborhoods that could flourish and benefit, then we are continuing that cycle of violence. And by addressing these social determinants of health, we will make our community healthier and better. And so it's not like Dr. Regina said, it's just not one issue. It's just not one fix. That we need our entire community to come together, because it impacts every single one of us. And we have all felt it in some way, shape, or form, whether it is you reading or seeing that news story and it hurts you to that core, and you make that extra trip around your house to make sure the blinds are shut and all the doors are locked. You are being impacted by that violence. Whether it is your daughter who is having a sleepless night and is scared, you are being impacted by that violence. And we have to acknowledge that it's going to take all of us making changes and wrapping around each other and demanding that things change within our community as a united voice, to see that change and to make it better for our children and for our elders and for the people in the community who need to feel safe. That should be something that we have as a right. We should feel safe about talking about how things are impacting us. We should feel safe about demanding for justice. And when we become more united and we're more voices speaking on that same front and that same issue, and we're standing with each other on those, then I think it's harder to ignore. And so I appreciate spaces like this, and I appreciate women like you who are all working in that same space to make that heard.
Thank you, Danielle. And one of the comments talks about the cycle, right? There's a cycle, and yesterday we talked a little bit about once an atmosphere is sustained, it becomes a culture, right? Once the atmosphere is sustained, it becomes a culture. If the atmosphere we sustain that it's okay for young people in certain communities, in communities of poverty, in BIPOC communities, right, to continue to be killed through gun violence, to continue to have to establish climates, right, and atmospheres of violence, right, and that this violence is just the norm. Once we allow it to become the norm, it becomes culture, right? And now, not only being said to that, we're talking about coming out of a war on drugs, right? We're talking about coming out of, well, we're not out of redlining. We're talking about the issues when we're dealing with structural and institutional racism. We're talking about historical traumas that continue to impact one generation after the next, right? And so if we go back to the time of slavery, where black bodied men, right, back body, human trafficked men, let's say the words, human trafficked, they called them slaves, identified them in their books as slaves. They were human trafficked individuals. They were human, right? And we watched where they were being pinned against each other to fight one another for entertainment. We have to go back. The violence didn't just start. They didn't have a gun then, they had hands, right? They didn't have a gun then, they had words. And those words and hands were dividing them so that those in power, right, could stay in power and be entertained. And we go down, right? These traumas are happening and they're continuing to happen, and we go down. And let's come on up. And we're in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, where we go from war on drugs, mass incarcerations taking place within the nation. Gangs supposedly started to protect families and communities, right? And because they were scared. That's a trauma. They were scared. That was trauma that was handed down. They were scared. And so now we look at behaviors. We say, look at what they did, but we don't say, look at what he's going through. Look at what she's going through, right? And so as I move on to Tanya, and Tanya talks about the pieces where we add into the domestic violence piece, how many women, how many individuals have been killed based off of that division when it came to domestic violence, that pain, that shame, and how many families have been shaken. Sometimes you shake the prune, but we're shaking and we're taking all the goodness away. Talk to us, Miss Tanya.
I didn't really hear the question.
So Tanya, talk to your experience with gun violence.
I think when gun violence first impacted me, I was just about 6 or 7 years old. My dad's brother was shot and killed. I heard my parents talking about it late at night. I remember my mother letting me sleep in her bed, but at that time I was so young, I didn't know how to process it. I just know I never got to see my uncle again after that. And then again, at the age of 15, my mother's brother was shot and killed. And at that time, I wanted to process it, but I didn't have anyone to help me process it at that time, because I stayed with my dad, and he's just a very blunt to the cut person. He told me I needed to get over it and move on with my life. My uncle was no longer here. And I was like, wow, well, how was that supposed to really help me to get over what I was really feeling? So I suppressed all of those feelings in the way back of my head. And it wasn't until my daughter was killed when I started processing all of these feelings. I talked with my aunt, which was my uncle's wife at the time. And I was talking to her about how I felt when my uncle was killed, and I felt nobody was there really for me. And she said, well, I wish I would have known that, because I really would have talked to you a lot more. You know, I didn't know how you felt or any of that, because we lived a couple 100 miles away from each other. So my process thought is a lot differently now, because I had a trauma to my brain. My process when there's shootings here, my automatic reaction is I need to talk to that family, because I don't want that family to go through that alone. A lot of times I don't get to talk to those families because I don't know how to get in touch with them, or I don't know them. And my mother always says, you can't go through life like that, letting that gun violence affect you in that way. And this is something I've worked on through therapy so many years, and I cannot get over that. It is embedded in my brain. I need to be there for that family, because I know what that family is going through. I know what they're gonna go through, and it's not pretty. As sometimes the words that we used, or different people use for gun violence, there are always some very pretty words, and I don't get that, because gun violence is not a pretty thing. When you and I have seen a person shot and killed in my youth before I moved here, and that is something I will never get out of my brain either. But most of the times the person is covered up with something, and it's because it's not pretty. Just like when I go to the Capitol building and talk to these legislatures, and we use these nice, pretty words, and I'm thinking they are really not getting this. They are not understanding this. They are not processing this, because they have not been through what I've been through. So I started passing out my daughter's obituary when I meet these people, because I don't want them to see my daughter as just a number on her toe. She is a person still, even till this day, that her body is in the dirt. She has a personality. She is forever 22 years old, but in reality, to me, she's in her 30s. So I process things a lot differently these days. It's still hard for me to understand why we're still having gun violence in our communities. There are so many different avenues that we can be taken to stop it, or at least slow it down. And it's not being slowed down, because I think a lot has to do with people not being held accountable to do their jobs.
Thank you each for sharing. So when I love Tanya that you just Latanya, you just said that the numbers, when we look at the numbers, right? When we look at the numbers going up, when we look at the impact, I think one of the biggest issues I was saying myself is because we're trying to deal with a one-sided piece, right? We're trying to deal with a piece of a ingredient of the pie, right? Yesterday I used the ideology of we're baking this cake, and the cake has all these ingredients, and you don't know that the cake is coming until you smell the cake, right? But you know the cake is really there, change is really there, opportunity is really there, healing is really there, right? When you take that first cut and it comes out the oven, and you cut it, you place it on your plate, you place your fork, and you dive in. You dive in, the change is tangible. And I think we look at one to change what the laws are saying. One, we look at one faction of it, but are we really doing the work on the mental health piece? Do our people within this nation truly feel safe? Truly feel safe? And are we truly wrapping around them? Are we truly wrapping around families? Are we allowing them to speak their truths, right? Because even as we speak and we're sitting here, there's more. I was like, say their name, right? So I'm listening to each of you, and I have uncles whose names come up. I have friends whose names come up, right? Before even getting out of elementary school, or maybe going into sixth grade, a friend Russian roulette, shot in the head, right? And these numbers, like these just events, because that's what it was like. It was like gun violence in Black culture is like a family reunion. Like everybody come together for the funeral afterwards. People you ain't seen in years, people you don't even know the names of, and they like, you get there and they're like, that's your cousin. In comparison to the family reunion, right? Being the family reunion, and we learn to celebrate each other while we are here continuously lean in and listen to one another. We're celebrating the brokenness. We celebrate in brokenness. Are y'all getting it? We celebrating in brokenness. We celebrating in division. But when everybody is here and they're on their journey, and someone's doing well, or someone's at that point where they're discovering what they're supposed to be doing, we're absent. So we have a whole system that is rooted in socialization and how we socialize one another's beliefs. That's added into our media, added into our educational pieces, added into how we build the individuals up, right? From the get-go. Not from later on once they're broken and they're shattered and we're doing a mending of the glass pieces, but from the get-go. So when we look at this, we got to go in. What are some of those intersectional pieces, some of the pieces that you see that we need to do the work on? What are some of the pieces that you see that we need to do the work on to add to us dealing with this gun violence issue in this country? And I want to say gun violence culture. I want to say gun violence culture, because what we see on television, the deaths that we see on television, or the incidents on television, are not even the mass majority of the incidents, right? And what happens, as Tanya said, they become a number. My brother is not a number, right? Mark is not a number, right? When I go through and I keep looking, if I would have been shot as many times I've been in a shootout or somewhere near it as a child, because I didn't care. I didn't think I was going to live to be 25. So I'm here today, right? And people are looking like, she's on so much, she has so much passion in her. She's so passionate. Sometimes she gets so loud. She's so energetic when she's doing this. I'm here today, right, on a mission, because there was a point in my life where I thought at 25 I'd be gone. I didn't have a plan past 25. So, and see, that's a privilege when you can think past that, when you can think about, I'm going to become a doctor, a lawyer, and I'm going to live in this nice house, and I'm going to have this nice husband, and I'm going to have these nice children. I didn't think that way. I'm telling you right now, because of the impacts of trauma after trauma after trauma, we're not just talking about gun violence or violence as trauma. We're talking about physical trauma happening, emotional trauma happening, trauma after trauma. My belief in my mind, death. See, grieving is a trauma if we don't deal with it. In my mind, I thought I would die at 25 years old. On the 25th birthday, I was still married. I knew the divorce was coming. I was still married, and I was sitting in the house, and I was crying. I was crying. Do you understand me? Because I had no plan for nothing past that date. I thought I would be gone by that date. But I was sitting there, and that date came. That date came. And something had to happen after that date, right? And it feels like after that date, I begin to feel, I begin to live, right? Something in me woke up, because I had just been existing before the age of 25, right? And the next couple of years got really painful, because a lot of trauma happened, but it was happening to release me from the isolation that I was in. And so let's talk about, when we look at gun violence, right? What are some intersectional pieces when we talk about relationships, right? Some pieces that we as community members, right, need to do moving forward. We know that there's election coming up, right? We all know that. What are some things that we can do. We know we still have gun violence taking place in cities all over America that's affecting everyone in America, because some of these gun violence topics we're putting out on TV and streaming them for everybody to see. Secondary trauma. It's coming back to us again. We're getting hit with it again. So talk to me. Leah, talk to me about one of the intersectionality, one of the pieces you see, right, that we can do as we step forward.
One of the big things for me is you just said secondary trauma. People don't even realize that they're being traumatized by what the media is sharing. And one of the big things is an acknowledgement of that when you are constantly bombarded with people being slaughtered, one of the big things that, like, recently for me was the slaughtering of those 10 people in the Tops grocery store. That affected me. I just had to turn the TV off. I didn't watch the TV for a month because I was so traumatized by that these individuals couldn't even go to the grocery store to pick up milk without being gunned down. So as a community, we keep hearing the rally cry that we have to change the policies and this and that, but we never follow through. We just wait till the next big event happens. Then we have these rallies and cry again, but nothing ever takes precedent. Nothing changes, unfortunately, because we don't follow through with what we say we want. And these people that are in the position to make the laws and stuff, they're not doing their job. So we had to be okay with removing them and getting people in place that will do what we as an American people want. Because it's not just a Topeka, Kansas issue. This is everywhere. And it's very disheartening to see all these people passing away. Just a couple days ago, my husband came home and told me, don't go down. We live on a road, Hopkins Road, because there's a huge police presence. And I said, okay, I wasn't planning on leaving anyway. But he looked the next day and told me, well, it was a 15-year-old boy who had pistol whipped someone and carjacked a car and end up killing 2 people right after that. And I'm thinking to myself, a 15-year-old, what could have happened to this child that was the mindset? And because of the decisions that he made, now a 23-year-old woman is dead. And I don't know if the other individual survived or not. But those are the type of things that we have to look at as a community. Like, what are we doing? Where are we failing at that these kids are thinking it's okay? It's like they have no frame of reference to know that when you pull that trigger, that means you're taking away a life. And that's going to affect those people's loved ones, their friends, and just the community as a whole. I didn't know that 15-year-old child, but it still affected me. I didn't know that 23-year-old woman that he killed. But here I am talking about it, so I'm affected by it. So there's so many different things that we really need to do. And the biggest thing is following through with what we say that we want. We don't want guns to be readily accessible. Then we actually have to do the work to make that happen, and not just rally together after a major event happens. And that's the problem. We've lost so many elders and babies within the last couple months that it breaks my heart and it makes me sick to my stomach, honestly, knowing that those families are just they're never going to be the same ever. You never are the same. Just thinking back to my experience, I never thought that gun violence would touch my life, but it did. We don't have control over that. But what we can control is making sure that we follow through and that we demand what's right for our communities and for the voiceless, because the kids can't do what we can do as adults. That's our responsibility, is to take care of the kids. So that's where I'm at. Just showing up and making sure you're doing your part is the big thing.
I thank you for that, Leah. As you spoke, I kept hearing the chain reaction. The chain reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Either we can continue this chain of brokenness, or we can set a chain that puts us in position for generation after generation to thrive. That chain. So we got to decide which way we want this chain to go. The other thing that, as Leah was speaking, that I kept hearing for us all is event plus, because events happen. We have no control over the event, but we have control over our reaction to the event. We have control over our reaction to the event. So event plus our actions get us to the desired outcome, right? Our reactions, right? There's nothing we can do about the event that has previously happened. But what we do right now will set us up for where we are going. Some people are trying to wait for the future, right? They're looking like, in the future, it's not going to be like this. But if you're not doing nothing right now, to get you to the future that you want, to get us to a place where the gun violence rates are down, to get us to a place where young people believe in themselves, and to get us to a place where those who are dealing with mental illnesses or trauma feel supported, then we're going to continue to get the same thing. We're not going to get the desired outcome. So it's right now for each of you that are watching, right? For each of you are watching, it's your right now. What are you doing right now? What are you doing right now? Because you feel safe in your house, because you live in the pretty neighborhood, because you work on a good job, what are you doing right now? Because I can tell you, by the time your kid gets in high school, middle school, somebody they come in contact with is going to be hit, and are going to be dealing with something. And either your kid is going to be willing to talk to you about it, or they're going to walk through that by themselves, and you're not going to know what's going on. So right now, I value people, so I'm going to take action that awakens people to see who they are. Right. So Danielle, tell me one of the intersectional pieces that you see that we need to work on.
So I've got a few running here. 110 people in America die every day to gun violence. So it's not just those ones that we see come across the news. 110. When I started this work, it was under 100 just a few years ago, and the average has jumped to 110. Firearms are the leading cause of death of children and young adults in America, the leading cause of death of children in Kansas. Firearms. It has surpassed motor vehicle accidents. That should be alarming to us. We can, right now, everyone has an opportunity to contact their senators. Just yesterday, I believe, the day before, the House passed a bill to ban AR-15s, and it is moving over to the Senate floor. So contacting your senator and expressing why this is important to you. We know that when AR-15s are used in a shooting, 6 times more people die in the situation, right? So we have an opportunity right now to remind those elected officials that they work for us, that they are there to pass legislation, pass the laws that benefit our communities. So reaching out and telling them how it has impacted you and why you feel strongly for them to then move forward and pass this bill. Additionally, doing some work to give a presentation. I pulled the data and the stats on gun sales in our state. And there's one way to do so in particular from an online gun source that basically functions like the eBay of gun sales, and just taking the data there, breaking it down to the different communities, counties specifically within our state. What you find is another data set that we have is we do health rankings of the counties within our state as well. And these are determined off of infant mortality rate within the community, the average age of death, the percentage of diabetes, violence within the community. What we know is that lower health rankings, the counties that have the lowest health rankings, are the counties that had the highest gun sales, had the highest concentration of guns within that community as well. The counties that had the highest health rankings, the best health in the community, had the lowest gun sales within their community. And I don't think, that that's a surprise to absolutely anyone. Locally, I know one thing that we have combated in our community is this idea and this thought from our elected officials that that preventing violence, preventing crime is a policing issue, and it is not. Police respond to crime. They don't prevent it. What we know is preventing crime is by addressing social determinants of health, by providing people with what they need, so that sense of desperation, that sense of unknowing, that culture that has been perpetrating with systems that have failed communities for years is no longer there, is no longer in place. When we are providing people with what they need, when we are making mental health accessible, when we are allowing for wages and jobs that are paying the bills and providing food, then people are going to have what they need, and we are going to see that violence reduce. And so this idea that elected officials have about funneling more and more and more money into our policing systems and ignoring the social determinants of health factors, ignoring the need for mental health, reducing the wage gap, childcare accessibility, making sure that we have adequate transportation, expanding healthcare coverage in general. Those are things that people need so that they can thrive and survive, and that their children then see them thriving and surviving and being happy, and then we change that culture. And so an important aspect that we have to do is make sure that that narrative stays on point, right? Because that narrative has specifically been skewed by the system. The system has always benefited the same people for centuries, right? The same people benefit from the way that policies are written and where money goes. And we know it is not in Black communities. We know it is not in disenfranchised communities. And so continuing that same narrative is never going to change what's happening. So we have to continue to insist. We have to continue to use our voices to say, we have to invest in our communities. You work for us, and we're going to hold you accountable. And that takes everyone's voices. And I know it's really hard when you've been ignored for so long, time and time again, being told that your opinion doesn't matter, right? That is adding to that basic trauma, right? One more person telling you that what you think and believe doesn't matter, but we have to stay persistent on holding elected officials accountable for locally for how they're spending money and diverting money, and on a state level on how laws are being passed, and on a national level with that same deal. And every one of you has a voice that matters.
So again, right now we have a common message going. Follow through. We have a common message going. Follow through. I love, Danielle, that you let it be expressed and put out there. Police respond to crime, right? They don't prevent the crime. They respond to the crime. They respond to that there's an incident taking place, that something's already broken. They're not coming there to make sure that you get to cry for a little bit, right? They're not coming there to say kumbaya to everybody. They're not trained to say kumbaya. They're not trained to deal with the mental issues. They're not trained, right? And so now community, we got to look at that piece. We got to look at the piece. The other part I want to say to you is, if you're not registered to vote, why not register today? If you're not registered to vote, I mean, come on, you're here. You know that change needs to happen, right? There's power in your vote. But the thing is, remember, it don't just take one of us. It takes a movement of us. And if you add to the number, you add to the movement. So I need you to register to vote. Not only do you register to vote, if you know young people who are around you, 17 years old, they can register. And at 18, they're actually able to vote. So let's get them registered earlier. Civic engagement is very important. See, the good old boy system continues to exist because we're not training young people to lead this nation. And guess what? You're going to get old. And the young people are going to have to take hold of it. Why not get them trained starting now? Why do they have to wait until brokenness happens and they feel like they have no other choice, or it's a way of building themselves up? Training them starts now, right? We all know within the past couple years, as we've studied American history, we've found out that there's a lot of missing pieces in that history. We found out that and I want to say this to you as we move forward, because the division actually is what's causing more issues, increased numbers, increased isolation. There's no such thing as Black history and American history, or indigenous histories and American history. If it took place on this grounds, it is American history, and all history must be valued. All bodies must be valued. All lives must be valued. All gifts and talents must be valued. The other factor I want to say to you is, if you are voting, don't vote just because. Vote for someone based off of what someone else tells you, or based off of the party alignment. I need you to vote knowing who you're voting for. And I need you to understand that once you vote for them, don't murmur and complain about them. Or once you don't vote, right? You don't vote, don't murmur and complain, because it's your responsibility to hold them accountable. You chose them, right? And let's say you didn't vote for them. Your community voted for them. Hold them accountable. Government is only government because of the people. You hold the power. So yes, they will complain about the select few that keep showing up and speaking up. They will complain, but we will not stop. We will not stop. We will move forward. And I need you to understand that if in your city, in your state, in your community, there's a select few people who are only doing the talking, why are you not standing up? Because your body, your voice is powerful too. Why won't you step forward? Right? So we're going to vote. Say, I'm going to vote. I don't know what you're doing, where you at in your house, where you at in the community, but I'm going to vote. Not only am I going to vote, say, I am going to take action. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to empower somebody else. Say, I believe that change is going to come. And the reason change is going to come is because you're going to do something. Say, I'm going to do something. See, this is what I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about, because it won't happen if you don't make it happen, right? I'm the stepologist because I understand I can't conquer it all. I don't have all the ingredients, but I promise you I can step through the ingredients. I can get them together. I can put the flour, the sugar, the baking powder, all the little pieces in together, because we about to get us a good pound cake. But I know I got to identify the ingredients and I got to get them together. I got to mix them together, right? We're a mixed population of people within this country. So it's not just one ingredient of us counts. All of us matter. All of us matter. As you look and you're sitting here on this platform with us today, listening to us, we all add another piece to this pie. Our difference is what makes the difference. So, Miss Tanya, can you add do you have any to add to this piece that we're on right now? Tanya, can you hear me? Tanya, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Tanya?
I can't hear. I'm not even good at technology either. That's a big issue for me.
Well, real fast, Tanya, I'm going to tell you this. I'm not good at speaking other cultural names, but I'm here in Houston, Texas, doing a conference, and it's a lot of Nigerian names that are on my platform for me to say, and I just go on and let them know I'm sorry I messed up. Charge it to my mouth and not to my heart. I'm gonna mess it up. So Tanya, just give us a little bit of input if you want to add anything on. What is a piece that you see we need to do?
I didn't quite hear you.
Oh, Tanya, I'm gonna type it in the chat. Can you see the chat? Yeah. So hold on, y'all. I'm coming now. Don't y'all talk about us. Don't try to get off neither. She got off, y'all. Okay. Where she? Yeah, she didn't hear me. Okay, so let's continue to move forward, right? So, Danielle, you gave us a lot of data, and I know there's data on the numbers of nationally, how many individuals we have that are. We talked about the numbers of how many are killed per day per year, but now let's look at those broken pieces because we talk about within the Black body community, right? What are the numbers looking like in those areas? And I know you got them. I know who you are.
Well, in any numbers, right? Gun violence, when we're addressing the social determinants of health, they all impact the Black community at a much higher rate. So just in Kansas alone, 3 times higher rate of incidences of gun violence, whether we're talking domestic violence, whether we're talking about youth violence, the rate is much higher. And when we're talking about the social determinants of health factors, we know that it is impacting Black people in disproportionate ways. For instance, infant mortality. We know that even specifically here within our community, we have a zip code with not only the highest rate of infant mortality in the state, within a zip code, we know that Black babies are 2.5 times more likely to die than a white baby. We know that Black men born in our community are expected to live 11.79 years less than a white man born in our community. And when we put all of these pieces together, it continues to tell the same story. Our social determinants of health are leading to poor conditions for the Black body and for the Black communities. And that while we continue to let the same narrative go by and we continue to allow our communities to suffer in ways that lead to traumatic response, then nothing's going to change. And the data is there. It's clear as day. It's not disputable. We see it, and it's consistent around the country. It's not just a unique thing, like Leah said earlier. It's not a unique Topeka, Kansas thing. These are consistent numbers across our country, and in some places much worse disparities. So this isn't unique. We all need to be taking this stand, no matter where you are.
So I had someone attempt to compare the numbers within one state, one city, into another. And I said, we got to look at per capita. And as we look at that per capita, and we have to understand that one body affects everybody, right? One body affects everybody. And so when you're saying that because it's not like this state or not like this city or like this county, right? What you're doing is allowing it to continue because you're comparing it with something else instead of dealing with it. If I came to you, I went to the hospital, and let's say I had a wound, I got cut, whatever happened, I scraped my knee, I broke something, and it looked like on the outside it was healed, but I'm at the hospital, I'm at the emergency room, right? It got a scab on it, but I'm at the emergency room. And let's say I sit there 3 to 4 hours, right? And no one sees me because it has a scab on it, right? It looks like it's healed. I'm walking, I'm talking, I showed up, I'm all right. It's not like the person that they knew had pneumonia, or the person they knew had COVID, or the person is, but I'm there and I have this scab of trauma, this scab of pain, this scab of gun violence, this scab of confusion, right? I'm there and I'm sitting there, and no one still continues to see me. No one still continues to see me. And the moment they touch me, it busts open, right? All the pus, all the poisonous nature, all the venom, all the pain, all the isolation, all the confusion, all the trauma, everything just begins to just ooze on out. It's just oozing out everywhere. And then you go, what's wrong with her? You didn't deal with the issue. You didn't deal what she was full of, because she was full of it because it was in the community. It was part of the system. It was established. When we talk about institutional and structural systems, right, we talk about how they're set to do a thing, but we're still dealing with a system that was set when it didn't even believe that those populations were people. We're talking about a system that was built when they thought they was just worse than the animals. Right? You could go to jail for mistreating the animal or neglecting the animal, but when it came to this Black body, when it came to this BIPOC community, you were patted on your back. And so the system still pats on the back for the brokenness. But in this nation, we're saying we don't want that to happen. And when we talk about domestic violence, let's just move to it, right? Because we still have this system, this mindset that women have a place, these persons have a place, right? And they can be ruled over, and they should follow the direction of that man that's over them and know their place. We still have this culture where women are being hurt. We still have this culture. We know from 2020, moving on up, as we were going through COVID, that there were the domestic violence cases in this nation rose. We know that. And we know that when they count the data, part of the data that they're not looking at is the cases that were deaths that were domestic violence. It's just a homicide. But we're not adding that number. But when you really look at the number, a lot of those cases with women tied into domestic violence. And families come forward and they talk about it afterwards. But when she was going through, and she was calling out to you, did you hear before? Did you hear when she came into the store and she had 2 black eyes? Did you hear when you noticed she began to isolate herself? Did you hear when you noticed that she began to lose herself and everything about her changed? Y'all got this call, but we gonna keep going. Did you hear her? Did you see her? Did you believe that her mom was somebody too? Did you believe that her siblings were somebody too? Her children were somebody too? Her future was going to bring substance too? Did you hear? Did you hear? Did you value him? Did you think he was valuable when he walked in? When he walked in, because he didn't believe what you believe or date who you thought he should date, and you find out he was going through domestic violence. Did you think it was okay? Because he didn't line up with this falsified system that has been set in this nation about what a man should be or how a man should be? Did you hear him? Because those cases are happening every day within this nation. They're happening every day within this nation. And again, as we add and we talk about the division, the Black cases are going untreated. Those Black-bodied individuals are going underserved because we have a silent nature within our community that says what happens at home stays at home. and then she's gone, and then we talk about it. Then he's gone, and then we talk about it. Or then they're gone, and then we talk about it. Why couldn't we talk about it before the body hit the floor? Why couldn't we talk about it before the tape was lined out? Why couldn't we talk about it before the funeral? And why are her children, why are his children dealing with this for generations to come? So when I was asking Miss Tanya to talk, I've never been in that position. I've seen domestic violence. I've dealt with domestic violence as I was going through my secondary domestic violence, just going through last year, and how it raptured and it affected the whole family. And how the mental health of my family still today is shaken. But I'll tell you this, it was not one generation. That domestic violence went through several generations. And I can identify 3 generations where that happened through. And it was never put a stop upon within this country. Why? Why? Just sit to yourself.
I would like to say something too.
What you say, Ms. Tanya?
We need to do more than just talk about gun violence. We need to put plans into actions to really stop this. Gun violence is very devastating to our community, the families who are going through this right now. We shouldn't have to wait for someone to be killed to have a rally. We need to do something now, not wait.
Thank you, Tanya. Are y'all getting that? We got a common thing. We need to do something now, not wait. That's one of our common things that we just, as a theme, as we went through, we need to do something now. And I'm telling you, your now does not have to be that you do everything. It could be a letter to your legislature. It can be your senators, your representatives, your leaders. It can be a letter. It could be you get on, you're here right now on social media. What are you posting on your social media page? Is it just the trauma? Is it just the new dance genre that came out? Is it another video of hee hee ha ha? Or are you using this page as power to inform and to create a space of healing for others to come in contact with, right? Because you never know who's coming by your page, but it's one person that could be in a situation that comes by your page, and that one thing be the thing that let them be free, that helped them get free. And so all forms of your life, and I tell people, even when I'm having fun, funny thing, Leah can tell you back in the day, and it's been years since me and her got together, and went out. We used to go out. See, I don't mind telling my truths. I used to go out, and I'm talking, I was out, going out there to get my dance on, right? And Leah would tell you, it didn't matter where we was. We could be out in the club, and I end up having a therapy conversation almost with somebody. We supposed to be out having fun. It is somehow or another somebody find their way to me, and we end up, I'm going through this and this, and I'm going, I don't think I'm supposed to be in the club. I like to dance, but I don't know if I'm supposed to be in the club, because every time we come in here, while everybody else having fun, I'm over here giving therapy sessions in the club. Or I'm on the way to the club. A group of women want to go somewhere, and I get in the car with them, and we driving, and all of a sudden, it just started coming out, and I'm going, yeah, I don't think I got, you didn't want me to go to the club tonight, did you? You just trying to tell me that this ain't my life, right? Even here in Houston, just walking in, yesterday, a young lady stopped me, and we start having a conversation. She's here, end up going through a divorce, married someone, mistreating her, wasn't there for her, didn't value her. And we're in the middle of the hall. She don't know me. She don't know my name. She don't know where I come from. But it doesn't matter where you are, who you are. There should be a safe space around you where people can lean in. And no, you don't have to pick it up, because I'm telling you, I can't wear it. I can't wear it. I'm thicker than a Snicker, and I can't wear your trauma. I need you to know. I can't wear it. I'm trying to wear my own. I'm trying to wear my own and deal with my own. But I can pick it up and give you a safe space, and we hold each other together, and I give you a space to lay it down at, because I'm going to lay it down after you exit me. It's not going to stay with me. So it's okay to give people who are on the move, who are willing to do the work for healing. I'm willing to work with you. What do you all say about that? We're willing to work with those that are willing to do the work, ain't we? But I can't work it for you. In this season, as we go and we deal with this, you all, you can't work it for other people. You cannot work it for other people. So I will work with you, but I will not work for you. I will help you. You can call me a leader if you want to call me a leader. But the reason I can lead you is because I'm leading with you. I'm leading with you. I'm representing what you're willing to be a part of. I'm representing what you're willing to let me know about, right? But I cannot do for you what you're not willing to speak out on. Because then when it goes wrong, it's my problem and not yours. So I'm going to need you to authentically take some power back into this. Our nation needs to heal. Our families need to heal. And our children right now, the levels of stressors that they are dealing with are different. It's different. I watched one of my children lose close to 60 people since 2020. I don't know. Out of the trauma that I dealt with as a kid, I don't know in today's system, in today's culture, if I could have dealt with what she's dealing with right now. I don't know if I could have. The secondary trauma from watching her go through and trying to assist her has been harder than anything I ever knew in childhood, right? And so I say right now we have to put some pillars in place. Chris Weir yesterday brought out that we need to give our youth some things that they can do, positive things that they can do, right? People of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that can connect with them. I talk a lot about mentorship and entrepreneurial program. We need to establish them throughout the states, throughout the communities. There are young people in those communities that are looking for ways that they can provide for themselves and provide for their families. Why would we not, at young ages, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, begin to harness in on them and help them build their own? Help them build their own. Show him how it's done. Show him how he can make his own money. Show him or her how their difference makes the difference. Why can't we not establish that right now? But as well, why can we not do the civics programs and bring them in at early ages, even though they don't look like what America wants our system of leadership to look like? Why don't we go into those communities, train them, and lead them in a way that allows them to become the leaders? Somebody talk to me, because we're going to wrap up. We have about 8 minutes, you all. And so I want you all to just go around at this point and give some of your wrap up comments. And I want to tell you, before you do that, I thank you all for leaning in this space with me. This was very therapeutic for me. It was very therapeutic for me. And I thank you for your words, your wisdom, and just your presence. I honor you. Leah, you want to start us?
Yes, I wanted to touch on something you said about why aren't things talked about or addressed before the tape is laid or before the funeral. And a lot of it is, like you said, in the Black community, we're programmed to believe or think from an early age what happens at home stays at home. And it's because we're anchored in the past and someone has not stepped forward to break that anchor. And so you could be that person. If you recognize that, then make that decision to break that generational baggage that's been carried from generation to generation. Like you said, that you could identify 3 different generations where that domestic violence was present. Well, at this point, because you've done the work on yourself and because I've done the work on myself, I can't consciously allow things that I know are not going to serve my family to continue. So that's the big thing. I have never been a big believer in keeping things in the house because it's uncomfortable to speak on. And you know my past, you know my story, you know I speak on it because it's not about me after a while. There's other people that can find healing for me deciding to share. And so that's, or avoid situations altogether, because that's the big thing. If you hold stuff like that close to your chest, then your younger family member may not know the warning signs of when they're about to get into a relationship that's not going to serve them or that may end their lives. So it's not doing anyone any favors not to speak on trauma or hurt or whatever it is that we have been taught to believe that we can't speak to in the Black community. And it's not serving us or anyone that's associated with us not to seek guidance from counselors or other modalities of healing. It doesn't have to be that you go to therapy. You could do a non-traditional thing like me. I did do the therapy, but talk therapy didn't work for me. So I decided to go find something else that would. So yeah, that's kind of like what I want to wrap on, is that stop anchoring yourself to the past. If we're going to step forward, then step forward. And that's my piece.
Danielle?
I think partly, and of course I can't speak for everyone on this, but from what I see, even from families that I serve or work with, is the fact that mental health care is not widely available. It's not a norm, right? It's not as simple as just making an appointment, because many people don't have access to health care that will help pay or have the ability to travel to another city to maybe access health care. And so when we don't have availability and we don't have accessibility to something, then it isn't a norm. It doesn't feel like something that you should just access. And if we made it more available, if we made it more accessible by making sure that we expand Medicaid, by making sure that we make premiums at job places more accessible to all families, we had jobs that were family-friendly workplaces that provided mental health services to their employees, that normalizing generally just in our society of having the access and availability to reach out for help, I think is a step as well, right? Like, we have the internal work that we need to do within our own family and cultures, but then broadly to make sure that it is something that is accessible when someone's ready, like when someone needs that. And we have a lot of advocacy to make that happen within our communities as well.
Thank you so much. Ms. Tanya, do you have anything to add?
Well, I would like to say, in my opinion, we need to get these kids, our children, involved in more positive things. I don't think Topeka is such a child-friendly city to be in. Well, I live downtown, and I moved there just because they have a lot of things that are offered there. But I seem to think that they are alcohol infused, and there's a lot of things that I wanted to see, but I would not take my grandchildren to it because it's infused with alcohol. But like Danielle said, our mental health needs to be really overhauled. I've dealt with mental health issues a long time within my own self, but within other people that I've been involved with. And it's hard to get mental health for a person who needs it but can't say that they need it. You know, it's like going to a doctor and you have a hole in your body, but you can't tell the doctor, I need my hole fixed. So they just look at this hole as a hole and send you on your way. That's not right. So, you know, speaking as a person who has seen the police be brutal to people who have mental illness, it is very devastating to me. I don't think our police are trained to deal with a lot of mentally ill people. I think they need to really seriously be trained, or they need to get someone just for that job. And I know they have a avenue for that because they've been to my house many a times for a person that had stayed with me. So I don't get why we have all these police shootings, you know, just because they're in such of a rush to deal with that person instead of taking their time to understand what that person really is going through. You know, just like our children, I think a lot of them are misunderstood because there's not a lot of people willing to take the time to understand that child, that child may need help, more help than we can give, but still don't deny that child that service to get that help. So I think that goes a lot in our communities too. We may not know how to ask for help, but we need help. So, you know, I don't get how, you know, you can be denied because you don't know how to ask for help. You know, that's my avenue.
Well, thank you each so much for joining me on today. Remember, today's session was about relationships and mental health, right? And it was about us coming in. So, what we did was just tie in, right? It's a whole. It's going to take the whole, but inside the whole, there are pieces, right? There are ingredients, and each of us are an ingredient that makes the difference, that makes change come about, right? And so, one of the things I need for each person who is watching, that has tapped in and that's willing to share, I need you to understand that how you relate to people and connect to people is valuable in this season of healing. I need you to understand that your vote is value. Your vote is your voice. I need you to understand that there is someone who's looking for you. There is someone who is looking to you. So, regardless of how you feel like you're doing it, regardless of you saying that I'm no one's mentor, I'm no one's leader, you are. Someone's watching, someone's following you. And I need you to understand that you matter. You matter. Your life matters. Your children's lives matter. Break the chains of yesterday and step into the fullness of your today. What you do today is what's going to determine what tomorrow looks like. And so let's start now. You may have messed up 3 seconds ago, but let's start now. Let's start right now, stepping forward to heal our nation, stepping forward to cut these numbers, stepping forward to make sure we all feel like we're included. I thank you for joining me today on Let Us Step Forward, and thank you to all my guest panelists. Have an awesome day, everyone.